Hello! Today we are going to talk about one of the three indicators of wetlands according to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Today we're going to talk about hydrophytic vegetation. The other two indicators that we need to have a regulatory wetland according to the Army Corps is hydrology and hydric soils. I have two other videos that we'll link to on those indicators, hydric soils and hydrology. Hydrophytic vegetation for this video is vegetation that has the ability to survive in soils and or water that is low in oxygen, and the water and soils will be low in oxygen due to the hydrology of wetlands because of the at least periodic presence of water. Now, plants to live in water have to have a lot of adaptations. So there can be morphological adaptations of plants that you may have seen before, like buttress tree trunks. We also have arenchyma, and arenchyma are air-filled pores. So the cattails behind me have arenchyma in them. If you squeeze them, you'll feel those pores. You also have prop roots. Again, mangroves have those. Prolonged seed viability because they have to wait for when maybe the water recedes to settle in the soil. Water-based seed dispersal as well. And in some cases, underwater seed germination. Those are just some of the adaptations that plants have for living in these environments that have water at least at some times of the year. So we are in Flett Wetland on the outdoor lab of Clover Park Technical College. And in the wetland, we have some plants here. Probably one of the more abundant one is the invasive reed canary grass that is sort of surrounding me. In the background, we do have cattail, Typha latifolia. That is the native species of cattail. And then we also have a floating vegetation. It's very small. I'll try to show it to the camera. We have duckweed. There are some others in the area, but those are probably the three most abundant around. When we're talking about wetland vegetation, for the Army Corps of Engineers on their wetland delineation data forms, you have up to 4 strata that you can talk about. Here in Washington State and the Western Mountains, Valleys, and Coast region, you do have 4 strata. You have the herb strata, which would include our reed canary grass, our cattails, and our duckweed. You also have the sapling or shrub strata, which in the background above the cattails you might see some willows peeking out. Most of those willows are going to be in the sapling or shrub strata. Now you may be thinking, well, willows are trees or woody trees. So how do you tell the difference between a sapling or shrub and the tree strata? Trees will have a diameter at breast height, a diameter greater than 3 inches. The sapling and shrub strata will have a diameter less than 3 inches. So in the case of the willow, you might have a willow that's large enough to be in the tree strata, but in most cases, at least in this wetland, they will fall in the sapling or shrub strata because they have a diameter less than 3 inches. Another strata is the woody vine strata. We don't have, to my knowledge, any woody vines in this particular wetland, but it is a strata that you can have on the data form. Also on the data form for wetland delineation, you'll be asked to do wetland indicator statuses for all of the species that you observe. So these wetland indicator statuses are not based on scientific studies necessarily or quantitative observations. It's actually based on qualitative observations by practitioners and scientists in the United States. So it is not a specific measure or a predictor of tolerance to water or inundated or noxic conditions, or on the opposite end of the spectrum, tolerance to drought, but rather based on observations by practitioners. I do find them to be pretty accurate based on what we know and what the specifications are for those indicator statuses. But sometimes, plants grow in places where we may not expect them. So the indicator statuses that we have for wetland delineation are obligate, and these do have abbreviations and percentages of the percentage that they'll be found in wetland environments. So I'll put those, we'll have those as text over here. So we have obligate, facultative wetland, facultative upland, and then there are also some plants that do not have an indicator status specified. If you look at some historical documentation, you might see pluses and minuses associated with facultative wetland, facultative, and facultative upland statuses, so plus and minus signs. Those are no longer used anymore, but I did want to bring them up just in case you look at some of the older documentation. So here in Flett Wetland and around me, the reed canary grass has a facultative indicator status, which means that it does prefer, moist and wet soils, but you'll notice that it doesn't necessarily grow where there's a lot of water, a lot of deep water. On the other hand, the cattail, it is obligate wetland. It, most of the time, you will observe it in a wetland environment. Same thing with the duckweed. Duckweed is a floating plant, so it needs to be growing on the surface of water. And then for upland species, we don't have any nearby because I think even the Douglas fir, which is behind the camera, is facultative upland. So you have these different indicator statuses again, and there's percentages associated with how often they'll be in the wetland. The other thing that you'll have to do for determining, do we have hydrophytic vegetation? Do we meet this indicator according to the protocols set forth by the Army Corps of Engineers? You have to sample your wetland vegetation. Flett Wetland, the portion that we're standing in, is over 80 acres. It would be very unreasonable to try to determine every single plant species that is present in this wetland. Even though it is dominated by two species primarily, the reed canary grass and the cattails. There's a lot of other species that are sprinkled in. So it's unreasonable to try to sample them all, or to try to determine all that are present in a wetland. So instead, we use sampling techniques. So there are measures of plant abundance in the wetland delineation manuals from the Army Corps. For trees, they do mention basal area, calculating tree basal area. You can also do stem density for trees, shrubs and saplings, and the other strata as well. And another one, particularly if you have a fair amount of diversity, is the point intercept or line intercept transect. It's probably the most timely of all of these, but it is less erroneous. It's probably the most accurate method. However, most wetland delineators use percent aerial cover. So that would be putting out some sort of quadrat or area around you. So it's very common for the woody vine, herb, and shrub strata to use an area of 5 feet around the center of your plot. So 5 feet radius around your plot. For the tree strata, that radius extends out to 30 feet from the center of your plot. And you're just looking at, again, aerial cover, so looking down from above. How much cover does that particular species provide? So very quickly around me, within 5 feet, I don't have any trees within 30 feet of me. So I only have herbs within 5 feet of me. And I would very quickly, and this is an estimate, I did not prepare this, so I'm just doing this very quickly. I would say I would have 50% cover of the reed canary grass and 5% cover on the duckweed, and the rest is actually more open water, and then we do have some algae on the surface of the water. So aerial cover, just like that. It is the most common, it is the easiest to do, but it is subjective from person to person, and the most prone to error, which is why doing a lot of practice is very handy. So again, just to review what we've gone over today, we reviewed the 3 indicators for wetlands according to the Army Corps of Engineers: hydrology, hydric soils, and hydrophytic vegetation. We also talked about some adaptations that plants have for living in these wet environments, the different strata, woody vines, herbs, trees, and shrub or sapling. And we talked about the indicator statuses: obligate, facultative wetland, facultative upland, and sometimes you have no indicator status. And then finally, the methods for determining plant abundance. I hope you found this video informative, and go out and have fun in the wetlands.